Welcome to the Nurture Small Business Podcast. I'm your host, Denise Cagan, president of DCA Virtual Business Support. At DCA, we believe in small businesses and the families they support. Learn more at dcavirtual.com.
Hey listeners, I need your help with something. Have you heard about reauthorization of the Small Business Administration? Well, we have a couple of really special things. First of all, we have a podcast coming to you in March that will be talking about what this particularly means. We'll have special guests from the Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Business Voices, as well as someone from the Bipartisan Policy on Business. So join us then. But in the meantime, you can also take our survey, which is on our website, that talks about this initiative to reauthorize the Small Business Administration. Go to dcavirtual.com/collaborations. It's right there on the website.
So if you were listening last week, you heard us talk about what type of roles a business owner needs. And we talked about how you can build your business and replace you. Well, today we're going to kind of continue that conversation and talk about how to structure your business so you can step away from it without feeling like it will implode. So that's the important piece. You know, as a business owner, when you step away, you get really nervous. At least I did the first couple times I've done it, but I have successfully stepped away and allowed my team to run it and not been constantly on my phone and computer checking in on them. So Carrie Ann Powell is here today to talk to us, and she's going to impart her wisdom and insights a little bit about Carrie Ann. She is a speaker and a champion of small and medium-sized businesses, as well as a global business strategist. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Denise. So great to be here with you.
I am so happy to have you here. Now, you are a strategist, but I saw ESQ behind your name. So you're also an attorney, are you not?
I am. I call myself a recovering attorney.
Right.
Yes, no, I spent many years as a Washington, D.C. attorney and lobbyist and fundraiser. So then I moved into business after that. But yes, I am an attorney.
Okay. So, I'm a graduate of the Goldman Sachs 10,000 Small Business Program.
Oh,
and
yeah.
some of the work that they do is really trying to get us involved with our local congressmen and women and senators. And so last July, I was actually in DC and got to, interface with several of them. So that's really cool that you would say that. So what is the role of a lobbyist? I just kind of...
Oh, yeah. I think, frankly, to be honest, a lobbyist is simply someone who is paid to do what citizens should be doing, right? In the end, what you did in DC was lobbying. You were meeting with your members of Congress and you were expressing what the needs are, whether it's for, in your case, small businesses and the needs for small businesses, but expressing and educating, frankly, our members of Congress about what it is that we need in our communities, in our, for whatever the issue is that you're passionate about, and really having a conversation around it and being able to come up with actual solutions. So, oftentimes the lobbyist, I would help to draft legislation, make some suggestions on how things would happen, which is what citizens can do every day. So it's really about, and business owners, particularly your audience. I mean, obviously, look, we're all business owners. We're all busy. We have teams. We have all these things that we're doing. But if we are going to stand firm and hear our voice as small and medium-sized business owners, we must be communicating with our members of Congress because they won't know what we need in order to be able to thrive.
Agreed. One of the initiatives that was hot topic was reauthorization of the SBA. Mm-hmm. Interestingly enough, the SBA didn't even show up to the event on the day they were supposed to.
Oh, that is awful. But the thing is, though, a lot of these sort of agencies that look, if this was a situation that was, lobbying for, very large businesses, I guarantee you, the agency would be there. A lot of these federal agencies that deal with small businesses or anything that's really not sort of mega and large and sort of very boisterous often don't have the staff, don't have the teams, don't have the infrastructure to be able to kind of, go around with all the different things they need to be able to do. And that's why we need to always not only lobby for them continuing being authorized, but also to be able to get the resources they need to be able to have enough staff to be able to do the things that they need to do. Because just having it existing is not enough. It also needs to be able to have the resources to provide the kinds of programs that are necessary for small business owners to be able to thrive. And in the end, that's the bottom line.
Absolutely. And that makes perfect sense because the reauthorization is all about restructuring so that it fits small businesses today. And small businesses impact the economy. And I know that's something that you know something about.
Denise, tell me about it. When you start looking at, here in the United States, I believe the stats right now are at 95% of businesses are small and medium-sized businesses. Yes? 2/3 of people are employed by a small business. That's just in the US. When you start looking at the rest of the world, the numbers are even higher. Like 99% of businesses in Europe, not to mention in the continent of Africa and then in Asia. So you start thinking about the entire global economy relying on small businesses. But yet when you have, concerns around, look, everyone's saying, is this going to be a recessionary year? I don't know. I don't have a global, a little ball that I can look into. However, if that's the conversation then needs to talk about how do we then provide resources, investment, systems that can support small businesses so they can thrive. Because when you start looking at the impact that they have on the economy, and not just, yes, definitely local economies, right? You can clearly see that with taxes. You can look at that with the infrastructure, you can look at it in the way that, most of the local charities are supported by small and local businesses, right? Mm-hmm. So we can always say, okay, in my town is run off of small businesses. But when you start looking at it statewide, and then you start looking at it nationally and then globally, small businesses are vital to the economy. Not like, oh, they're good to have. They are the economy. As a result, whatever decisions that need to be made, whether they are in good times or in bad times, need to always support small business owners.
And they create such a positive impact on the community. You mentioned some, generation of jobs, which is income that stays in your local area. So what other positive impacts can small, medium-sized businesses and even startups have on our local economies? Well,
I think first we have to look at it, okay, employment, period. That's a fact. 2/3 in the United States, 2/3 of employees work for a small business. So therefore, the majority of folks are coming from that. So if you look at employment alone, employment's a big factor, that alone. Then you start looking at, okay, what is the tax base? Okay, we're looking at what supports a local economy more than just the employment. It's being able to have roads. It's being able to have water. It's being able to have the infrastructure that makes it work for the people that live there. And then you kind of add on the additional things, right? So we have parks, but then oftentimes small businesses are the ones who are doing volunteer work where they're cleaning up parks, or they have a bench where they have a couple benches where they'll usually, paint and sort of adopt. There's usually a road that they're adopting. There's so many things. And then you start looking at nonprofits in those local communities that sort of make sure that the people don't fall through the cracks. Mm-hmm. I've served on a zillion and one nonprofit boards, and there's always, not to mention, you start to look at the percentage of the amount of contributions to those nonprofits. There are always higher percentage of small business contributions than large companies. And mark you, I'm not saying that large companies are bad. All I'm saying is the amount of impact that small companies have compared to large companies percentage-wise. Therefore, we should have at least the same amount of support and systems and resources that we should have to enable to thrive. So you start looking at nonprofits on those boards. There's always CEOs or vice presidents from those companies, small businesses, serving on those boards, and then all of the contributions coming from the employees. So I think you start looking at local communities and the way that small businesses are really impacting. That alone could say, if you took away nonprofits, you took away sort of the infrastructure, you took away volunteer opportunities, you took away the taxes, then what would that be? Those are things that make our communities thrive.
Absolutely. Now, slightly tangential to this, Amazon Smile is going away on February 20th, which I know small nonprofits are really up in arms about that. Do you have any thoughts around that?
Well, I cut my teeth in the nonprofit world. My first job coming to college was, fundraising for the United Way, and I was a fundraising director there. So I'm like a huge, huge component. And my first business was a consulting firm for NGOs. I think that any little thing that supports nonprofits, whether they're small or whether they're large, it impacts the bottom line, which then impacts the way that the people that are benefiting from that particular nonprofit gets their services or whatever the thing is, whether it's, environmental, for animals, for people, whatever. But I think it's really important for nonprofits, just like small business owners, to be able to diversify how their revenue base is coming. So if they're relying too heavily on one stream of income, a little problematic, particularly one that they can't control as much. Mm-hmm. So while I think it's unfortunate, and I really am really sad that they're taken away, because gosh, it was such a great program. At the same time, I think, I always tell, CEOs of businesses the same way I tell CEOs of nonprofits, you have to be able to be the one controlling where your revenue source is coming from. Yes, it'd be nice to have additional sorts of things that come in there, and it's lovely, but you're controlling it. You can scale it as how you'd like, and you can never really put your eggs in one basket.
Great advice. And I believe that would translate over largely to the for-profit sector as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's just, when you have, you start looking at products that we come up at, whether it's products or services and small business owners and small businesses have, right? There might be one thing that we know when we look at the numbers, it's the money maker in the business. So it's not to say that we shouldn't have those types of products. However, we must be always having a whole, like, in my opinion, I have sort of 8 fundamental things that I think small businesses, or really any business, but small business particularly, must have in their companies. One of which is systems and processes that protect or that make sure that they're innovating and optimizing at the same time. I know those two seem like they're the same, but they're not, and they also can sometimes conflict. But innovating really means, like, how are you consistently in your business coming up with ways to provide new services, new products, new ways of doing things, so that even though that one product or that one service is your big money maker, how can you continue to innovate it or to branch off from it? Or if you feel you need to, like, acquire a new company that has a particular skill set or particular product that already exists, maybe a smaller company, you buy that so that you can continue to innovate. So you're not relying on that one thing, even though that is your one thing, because when that one thing goes, it's really, and I'll tell you one story, Denise, one of my clients, their main client, they were doing, it was a service for gaming, it was an electronic gaming company, but they were regulated. So when the pandemic happened, some things in there and that client's country began to regulate. And so some of the businesses that they were doing, some of the ways in which they were doing business, like, it would have basically a lot of companies in that sector basically permanently closed. However, because we had been doing some work around finding ways to innovate prior to, that company was able to thrive. That business owner, I just remember that week after the whole thing shut down, like tears running down her eyes. She's like, I'm going to have to fire my staff. That's all she could think of at that time. Mm-hmm. We're like, nope, we're not. Well, you can cry right now. I'll let you cry. But, be honest with yourself. But now that you stopped crying, let's talk about this. And as a result, she was able to survive and be voted, like, top 15 companies to work for in an industry in our country. So my point is, it's so important to constantly be innovating. And of course, small businesses are known to be innovative. Like, we are the innovative, companies in the world. A lot of large companies try to look to small companies to sort of say, oh, how are they innovating? Our innovation kind of comes because we have to, right? You're like, oh, this thing, we're going to, like, quickly we were more agile, right? So we can kind of quickly innovate into this way. But what I'm recommending is perpetually having systems in place in your company, even if it's just, quarterly conversations around innovation. There's someone in the team that's about focusing on innovation. and listening to your team members when they are recommending things that can be innovative, so that you don't have all your things in one basket.
Honestly, I believe that was a huge factor in my company's survival through the pandemic. That and the fact that we were remote for years, 8 years before, 6 years probably before the pandemic hit. We're pretty much at a decade right now. So we didn't have to learn all those new systems. We were already there. So talking about this and growing and scaling your company, I know that you do some consulting around this. So you mentioned having processes. What else do our business owners need so that, because part of this is growing it, but you also want to take a vacation,
Honestly, that is, I feel like I am like, what do they call them? Like when they used to have the crusades back in the day,
Oh my gosh.
I feel like I'm like an evangelist on this, this whole idea of running your business smoothly so that you can walk away from it. And so, Denise, look, we all know this is not fill in the box, an easy thing to say. So we're not minimizing the concerns of your audience, saying it really is difficult to walk away. It is. And it's difficult. You can walk away, but it's difficult to walk away and not feel like the business is going to implode. So I recognize that. I would say, honestly, first things first, really, there are some fundamental things. Sometimes when we're entrepreneurs, we kind of have an idea and it's a great idea. And we said, well, we're going to make it into a business. And then we start in the business and then there's like a whole, like it just keeps going. We never go back to some of the fundamental things that make it solid. So it worked really well. You had a great skill set. You put up a shingle. People really loved your product, your service, and then you just kind of moved going. So what I like to do is sort of help people see. So I think of, if you don't feel comfortable walking away from your business because you think it's going to implode, I consider it to be like one of 4 of what I call symptoms of chaos. However, I do believe that underneath, so everyone's like, oh, well, the real issue is to, delegate or train staff or whatever the thing is. And you hear people say that all the time. And yes, and yes, and yes. However, I believe there are 8 really fundamental, true culprits that are causing chaos. So the first thing really is some fundamental things, wanting to make sure that, is your business aligned fully with your life vision? And I know no one wants to talk about this. It's kind of mushy, give me some real stats. The reality is oftentimes we started the business and it's no longer the mission, the vision, the purpose of the vision no longer is aligned to how you, the owner, wants to live your life. Now, when you start looking at, say, some of the major large companies, you don't really need to have a vision alignment between the CEO and the vision of the business. But when you're at the early stages, and I say early stages, meaning small and mid-size, even mid-market, Denise, and I know they think, well, you need mid-market, you don't really need to be aligned. But even at that stage, if there's no alignment, then it's very difficult for the owner to really know what needs to go into place in order for them to live the life they want to live as it relates to the business. So I think that's really basic, fundamental, but I start there, believe it or not. Then I kind of go around the circle around all these other different components, which we won't have time to dive into. But once we kind of do that, and then we start looking at some of the fundamentals, like what's the exit strategy for the business? Do you have an exit plan? Because if you don't, then you can't have a existing plan. Like, I know that sounds sort of silly, but if you don't know what the plan is to build a business so that you can then leave it, sell it, or whatever it is your plan is, I've noticed when I've worked with clients around these things, it's very difficult for them to say that I can walk away even for a weekend if you don't have a plan and how you're going to walk away for the rest of your life. So I think there's some fundamental things that need to sort of be cleaned up a little bit. So that's one. And then secondly, I think beginning to observe your leadership style. I think there's sort of 2 things in tandem, sort of the yin and the yang. There is your leadership, how strong and inspired is your leadership, and how good are your team members, the people that you've hired on to be in your team. Those 2 components, I think it's important to audit yourself and be honest with yourself. Inspired leadership is, how are you leading yourself? How are you leading your team? And how are you leading the organization? And then if you start looking at how your team is, Are they inspired? Are they rock star? Are they being able to sort of move into their greatness? And where does that start originally? It starts from just having a fundamental org chart to make sure that the people that are in the boxes actually should be in those boxes. And, were those boxes created? Were the roles created for the people, or did you create those roles in the organization because that was what you needed? And then you found people to fill the roles. And I know that sounds like, well, why would that matter? No, it does, because if you built an organizational chart that supports the business that you've created, that's aligned with your life, and then you hired strong people to fill those roles in the business, and you yourself are leading well, you are like halfway there to being able to know that, yeah, okay, I can move forward. But what I have noticed, like 9 times out of 10, is that, you kind of came up with a great idea, they built the business, blah, 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 things met moving. And then you're like, oh, my cousin so-and-so knows social media, so we're going to bring her on board. And then, so-and-so's daughter is really great at sort of sales. And so we're going to bring her on board. And then there was never any sit down and say, what is the organizational chart? Now, of course, if you do the organizational chart, the very, very, very beginning, if you have any folks that are really early on and they're, just starting, then everyone in that box is going to be you. But then you begin to move yourself out of the role and move it up. But, most of your audience are folks who've been in business for a long time, and it's difficult, Denise, to stop and pause in a busy, busy, busy business and say, okay, wait, let's look at our org chart again and see if this really makes sense. Do the people that are sitting in the seats that are in this org chart, really, are they the right people for this job, for this position? And if they are, then what is it that's causing them not to show up in a way that makes you comfortable enough to walk away? That then goes to your leadership. Are you leading yourself well? Are you leading your team well? Are you leading the organization well? Now, if everything is good on that side, then you start talking about, a strategy. How is your strategy? Does it connect with the things that people are doing on a day-to-day basis? What are your objective plans? All of those things, are they clear? Does everyone know where this ship is heading? And are there systems and procedures in place that get you there so that there can be strong execution? Those are sort of the things then that are less about you and your team and more about the things that you really want to be managing. You should be managing your systems. And so if you have systems, operating procedures that are in place, that are strong, and people know how those systems and operating procedures are connected to the strategic objective of the company. So when they go to work every day and they're doing whatever the minute task that they're doing, they know that when they do that, it is connecting to this, which is connecting to that, which at the end is going to achieve the big strategic goal for the company. Then everyone is focused and laser focused, Denise. And then, you really then have a ship that's running. So you then actually can walk away because you've got fundamental things that work, and you're not trying to manage people, but you're managing systems. And then you can walk away. If you don't have those fundamental things, it's very difficult to do so.
So I heard systems and processes, right butts in right seats, building the org chart to support the business versus putting cousin Sally in the role because they know social media. I also heard vision and values alignment. Did I miss something?
You got it all.
Okay. This is incredible.
Thinking about leadership, right?
Yes, leadership and leadership development. Yes. That was in there as well. Yeah. This is incredible. Can you share a client story, obviously anonymized, but how you helped transform them so they could get up and out of their business and go enjoy life?
To me, those are the best stories ever. I had one client where at the time, her team was, I think, on the fundamental stuff, which was, she knew what the business was. It was aligned to her. There was an exit strategy on some level. We had to tweak that a bit, but the fundamental stuff were there. However,
can you share the type of industry that was?
This was a consulting firm for political fundraising and also, I believe, some nonprofit fundraising as well.
Okay.
And she had a really, good team. But because of the misalignment of vision. So they didn't see the vision. She had the vision, but they didn't see the vision. Also, some of the folks were in the wrong seat. So there was some problems there. And then what a lot of people don't realize is that they're like, well, sure, okay, we'll do the thing. What happens when you have these fundamental things not working is you have then morale issues within the company and the team. And if you have a morale, oh my goodness, Denise, if you have a morale issue, it is almost impossible to really, really fix that without having to like release some people from staff. Because if you allow a bad situation to fester so much, it gets to the point where people, even if you have your values and you say them, there's like, we say what our values are, but we're not living our values in the company. You see this happening all the time. Then that creates a really toxic situation and it's difficult to get that out. So
they had some of that going on.
Oh, yeah. And so what I ended up doing, Denise, was basically we worked together. I had ended up, our company basically interviewed everyone on the team and had real long discussions. And we basically did a report back. And it was not, no one wants to hear that your team doesn't trust you at certain times. No one wants to hear that they feel that you are hypocritical at times. No one wants to hear those sort of uncomfortable statements. But if you are behaving in a way that's not aligned with the vision and what you say the company is, and you give a little bit of, oh, well, that person over there, I'll let them, slide on that, but, not slide on this. It's unclear. So we had to basically go in and do a lot of work in the second tier, which is the leadership side and the rockstar team side. And once we kind of did that, then she was able to create some good, stronger systems and have more, allow the company to be more firm on those systems, because you can create systems and operating procedures. And you say, this is how we do things here. But then you allow someone to slide and do not, it's like, oh, well, it's okay if you don't do step 4, or it's okay if you don't do step 5. But no, this is how we do it here. So if you can solidify those processes, then people feel like they can trust the systems and they trust that the company really does do what it is it says it's doing internally. And after that, gosh, this client's been, traveling the world. I'm like,
I want to be like her. That's amazing. That's amazing. So you have downloaded a ton of information. Your company is Trafalgar Strategies, correct?
Yes, it is. Trafalgar Strategies.
Okay. And how can our listeners find you after the podcast?
Well, again, if someone in your audience is feeling like they're having a bit of, if any of the things we talked about today rings true and they're feeling a bit uncomfortable, we wrote a book called, it's a short PDF called The 8 True Culprits That Are Causing Chaos in Your Business. And so you can find it at nobusinesschaos.com, www.nobusinesschaos.com. And it's a great way to just sort of skim through it. It's a skimmable document. You can sort of see, oh yeah, we're having that problem. That's the reason why. And I have some great fixes in there that you could kind of implement immediately. And, if you feel like, you want to have a deeper conversation around a major problem, feel free to reach out. The information is on that document as well.
Perfect. Carrie-Ann, thank you so much for being on today. You are, like I said, a wealth of information.
Denise, such a pleasure to have this conversation today.
Thank you for joining me for today's Nurture Small Business podcast, where the focus is on business growth, technology, and people strategies to help your business thrive. At DCA Virtual Business Support, our focus is making your business operations run smooth so you can focus on growth. Reach out to me at Denise@dcavirtual.com if you'd like to learn more.